She drove 9 hours straight to get home. She was exhausted, heartbroken from her aunt's hospital room, and all she wanted was her own bed. But the moment Evelyn Whitmore stepped through her kitchen door, she heard violin music, and she saw them. Her man, her best friend, a wedding arch, in her backyard. Neither of them knew she was standing there. For 10 seconds, she watched everything she'd built disappear. Then she closed the door, picked up her phone, and made one call. What happened next destroyed an empire. If you've ever been betrayed by the two people you trusted most, like this video, drop your city in the comments, and stay with me until the very end. Because this story is just getting started. The drive back from Savannah had taken 9 hours and 40 minutes, which was 40 minutes longer than it should have been because Evelyn had stopped twice. Once for gas outside of Beaufort, and once because she'd pulled into a McDonald's parking lot and sat there for 11 minutes without going inside, staring at the steering wheel and trying to remember what normal felt like. Her Aunt Clara had been discharged from the hospital that morning. The danger had passed. The terrifying oxygen mask and beeping monitors kind of danger that had woken Evelyn at 2 a.m. 3 days ago with a phone call from her aunt's neighbor, the one who lived next door and had a habit of calling at catastrophic hours. Clara was stable now, back in her small house with her medication sorted and her neighbor checking in twice a day. There was nothing left for Evelyn to do in Savannah except sit in that guest bedroom and stare at the water stains on the ceiling. So she'd left a day early. She hadn't told anyone she was coming back. That was the detail that would matter later, in the way that small, ordinary decisions have a way of becoming the hinge on which everything turns. She pulled into her driveway on Beaumont Street just after 9:30 at night. The Victorian house her grandmother had left her sat at the end of a wide, magnolia-lined block in the older part of Charleston, a 3-story painted lady with a wraparound porch and wood floors that creaked in 12 distinct spots that Evelyn had memorized over years of navigating in the dark. She'd grown up spending summers here. She'd inherited it at 26. She'd spent 4 years and more money than she could comfortably think about making it hers. The porch railings repainted in soft ivory, the kitchen updated with open shelving and subway tile, the backyard strung with warm Edison bulbs that she'd hung herself on a July afternoon 2 years ago, while Damien stood below her on the ladder and told her she was going to fall. She hadn't fallen. She'd been careful. That was, she would later understand, something of a theme. The driveway was full of cars. That was the first thing she noticed, and it struck her as strange in the vague, sleep-deprived way that strange things register when you've been driving for almost 10 hours and your brain is operating on gas station coffee and grief-adjacent exhaustion. There were cars parked all the way up the street, expensive ones. A Mercedes, 2 black SUVs, something sleek and European she couldn't name. She parked behind her own mailbox because there was nowhere else to go and sat there for a moment with the engine idling. Damien had mentioned something about a dinner. A business thing, he'd said. She'd assumed he meant his apartment downtown, the one he kept for what he called professional purposes, and what she had learned over 4 years of loving a man who operated in shadows meant a dozen different things, none of which she was supposed to ask too many questions about. She hadn't given it much thought when he'd texted 3 days ago. Handling some things this weekend, miss you. Because she'd been sitting in a hospital hallway waiting to hear if her aunt was going to need surgery. She killed the engine. The night was warm and heavy, the way Charleston nights get in late spring, the air thick with the smell of the jasmine that grew along her back fence, and something else, something sweet and floral she couldn't quite identify from the driveway. She grabbed her overnight bag from the back seat. The porch light was on, but the front windows were dark, which was strange for a dinner party. And for a moment she just stood on the sidewalk with her bag on her shoulder trying to decode what she was looking at. Then she heard the violin. It was coming from the backyard. Not one violin, several, playing something slow and ceremonial, the kind of music that had shape and intention to it, the kind of music you hire someone to play. She stood on the sidewalk for 3 full seconds just listening, her overnight bag digging into her shoulder, her brain doing the slow and reluctant work of assembling the available information into something coherent. A dinner party didn't need violins. She went around the side of the house instead of through the front door, following the narrow path along the fence that led to the garden gate. The gate was propped open with a brick she didn't recognize. The music was louder now, clearer, the strings carrying something that sounded almost like a processional. She could hear voices, a lot of them, low and murmuring, and underneath everything, the clink of glassware and the shuffle of a crowd. She pushed the gate open. What she saw stopped her where she stood. Her backyard had been transformed. Not decorated, transformed, in the way that implies intent and money and planning that goes back weeks, maybe months. White chairs had been arranged in neat rows across the lawn she'd spent 4 years cultivating, each one tied with silk ribbons in cream and gold. Her Edison string lights were still there, the ones she'd hung herself, but they'd been supplemented with dozens of additional strands that turned the whole yard into something warm and glowing. Flower arrangements stood at the end of each row. White roses and peonies, expensive, the kind you ordered from a florist who charged for consultations. At the far end of the yard, beneath the trellis she'd built the summer before last, and trained with climbing roses that had taken 2 full seasons to bloom properly, someone had erected a white arch covered in fresh flowers. Beneath the arch stood Damien DeLuca. He was wearing a suit she didn't recognize, charcoal gray with a white pocket square, his dark hair pushed back from his forehead in the way he wore it when he was being formal. He was standing very straight the way he always stood, the way that made rooms orient themselves around him, and he was looking across the rows of seated guests with the expression she knew best on his face, controlled, slightly imperious, present in the way that suggested he was also always somewhere else. She knew that face. She had studied it for 4 years. She had loved it, been frustrated by it, slept beside it, traced the particular set of his jaw in the dark, and thought she understood what it was hiding. Standing across from him, at the other end of the aisle formed by the rows of white chairs, was Vanessa Caldwell. Evelyn's overnight bag slid off her shoulder and hit the ground. Vanessa was wearing white. Not cream, not ivory. White. The particular white of wedding dresses, and she was wearing it as a wedding dress. There was no other interpretation available, fitted at the waist and flowing into something that pooled slightly at her feet, her dark hair pinned up with what looked like pearl clips. She was carrying a bouquet of the same white roses from the arrangements on the chairs, and she was moving slowly up the improvised aisle between the rows of seated guests. And every person in those white chairs was watching her. Evelyn stood in the gateway of her own backyard garden, the garden she had planted, the lights she had hung, the trellis she had built, the roses that had taken 2 seasons to climb. She counted to 10. She did not cry. At 7, a woman in the back row turned to whisper something to the man beside her and caught sight of Evelyn standing in the gate, overnight bag on the ground at her feet, car keys still in her hand. The woman's face went through 3 distinct phases: confusion, recognition, horror, in about 2 seconds. She touched the man's arm. He turned. He looked at Evelyn and then looked away with the urgency of someone who wants no part of what's about to happen. Someone must have said something, or the shift in energy traveled the way it does through a crowd, because the murmuring died in a slow ripple from the back of the rows to the front. The violins trailed off one by one, the last string sustaining a moment past the others before it too went quiet. Damien turned. The color left his face in a single motion, like water draining. Vanessa turned a half-second after him. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. Evelyn looked at Damien for exactly 3 seconds. Then she looked at Vanessa for exactly 3 more. She picked up her overnight bag. She turned around and walked back through the gate, along the path beside the house, up the porch steps, and through the front door. She set her bag down in the entryway. She walked to the kitchen. She put her car keys on the hook by the door where they always went. She filled a glass of water from the tap and drank half of it standing at the sink. Then she took out her phone and scrolled to a contact she'd had saved for 3 years. The call connected on the second ring. Victoria. Evelyn, it's late. Is it Clara? Is she? Clara's fine. I need you here tonight. A pause. 2 seconds of silence in which Victoria Langford, who was 35 years old and a senior partner at Langford and Associates and who had been Evelyn's cousin since birth and her fiercest ally since childhood, did the mental calculation that Evelyn knew she always did before committing to anything. Rapid, thorough, the kind of assessment that had made her extremely good at her job. How bad? Victoria said. It was not a question. I came home early. Another pause. Shorter. Give me 45 minutes. Evelyn put the phone on the counter. She stood in her kitchen listening to the sounds outside. The crowd noise rising again, urgent and disorganized now. The shuffle of chairs, voices raised and then lowered, someone giving instructions. Damien's voice, once sharp and commanding, and then silence. She moved through this house methodically. She checked the windows. She found the spare set of keys in the junk drawer and put them in her pocket. She went upstairs to her bedroom and looked at the closet, which held both her clothes and, she now confirmed, a section of Damien's, 3 suits, and several shirts on wooden hangers, exactly as she'd allowed because 4 years of loving someone creates a certain gravity of accommodation that happens so gradually you stop noticing it until you're standing in your own closet performing inventory. She went back downstairs. The back door opened. Damien came through the kitchen door the way he always came through doors, filling the frame slightly, the way large men with authority tend to fill frames even when they're trying not to take up space. He'd lost the pocket square somewhere. His jaw was set and his eyes were doing the thing they did when he was working out an angle, the slight calculation that most people mistook for calm. He said her name. Evelyn. She turned from the window and looked at him. He crossed the kitchen in 3 steps, reaching for her arm. Don't touch me. He stopped. His hand dropped. She watched him absorb the flatness in her voice. Not anger exactly, not yet. Something more structural than anger. Something that came from a deeper place. I can explain, he said, which was such an absurd thing to say, given the available evidence, that she almost laughed. Can you? She said. It got complicated. Things moved in a direction I didn't intend. There are 200 people in my backyard, Damien. I note. At a wedding, in my backyard. The backyard of the house I own. The backyard I built. She set her water glass down on the counter with a precise, deliberate movement. With my best friend. His jaw tightened. It's not what you think it is. Tell me what I think it is. He didn't answer that. Men who spent their lives controlling conversations knew when they were in one they couldn't control, and something in his expression shifted, the calculation giving way to something that might have been genuine distress, or might have been the performance of it, and the fact that she could no longer tell the difference was itself a kind of answer. Get everyone off my property, she said. She said it quietly. She didn't raise her voice. She had learned, over 32 years of being a black woman in spaces that were not always designed to accommodate her, that the quietest version of a sentence was sometimes the most devastating one. Damien stared at her. Now, she said. He went back through the door. She stood in her kitchen and listened to him clear her backyard. It took 22 minutes. She knew because she watched the clock on the microwave, counting the minutes the same way she'd counted to 10 in the garden gate, methodically, because methodical was what she had right now and she intended to use it. She could hear his voice outside, low and authoritative, moving through the crowd. She could hear chairs scraping, the sound of the catering staff beginning to break things down, a woman crying somewhere, Vanessa probably, or someone close to Vanessa, someone who had known and said nothing. She heard car doors. She heard engines. She heard the expensive sound of a lot of expensive cars leaving her street. She made a second cup of coffee she didn't drink. Victoria arrived at 11:18, 43 minutes after the call, which meant she'd been driving the moment she'd hung up the phone. She came through the front door with her leather work bag over one shoulder and her coat half on, her natural hair pushed back and her reading glasses already on her face, which meant she'd been reading something in the car, which meant she'd started working before she'd arrived, which was exactly what Evelyn had needed. Victoria took one look at her and said, "Tell me everything." Evelyn told her. Victoria sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and wrote while Evelyn talked. She didn't interrupt. She didn't make sympathetic sounds. She asked clarifying questions in a flat, professional voice. How long had Damien been keeping clothes at the house? Had Evelyn's name appeared on any shared financial accounts? Had she ever signed anything related to Damien's business holdings? Evelyn answered each question as precisely as she could, pulling out her phone to cross-reference dates, and the picture that assembled itself across the legal pad was clinical and damning and nothing like the story she'd been living. "You own this house outright," Victoria said. "Free and clear. It was left to me directly, no mortgage. His name isn't anywhere on the deed." "No." "Has he ever claimed residency here for any purpose you know of? He's tax filings, business addresses, anything like that?" Evelyn looked at her. "I don't know." Victoria made a note. "We'll find out." She looked up over her glasses. "How much money have you lent him? Total? Everything, whatever you can remember." Evelyn thought about it. The amounts that were large enough to remember and the ones that had been small enough to let slide. $3,800. In December. He said it was a temporary cash flow thing, something with his legitimate accounts being frozen pending an audit. He paid me back 2 months later. Or I thought he did. The money came in, but I never asked for documentation. Victoria wrote that down. "Okay?" Why okay? What does that mean? Victoria set her pen down and looked at Evelyn with the particular directness she reserved for situations that required truth over comfort. It means I need to check something, and if I'm right, you're not going to like it. She opened her laptop. She started searching. Evelyn sat across from her and watched her face, which showed nothing, the way it always showed nothing, which was how Evelyn knew to pay attention to the small things. The slight tightening around Victoria's eyes, the moment she paused typing and leaned slightly closer to the screen. There, Victoria said. Not loud, flat, factual. There it is. What? Victoria turned the laptop to face her. On the screen was a property listing, a luxury penthouse in the Charleston Marina development, listed under a holding company called Celestine Properties, LLC. The registered agent for Celestine Properties was a name Evelyn didn't recognize, but the secondary contact listed was a management company she did recognize because she'd seen its name on paperwork Damien had left on her kitchen table 6 months ago. That's his, Evelyn said. It's his and Vanessa's, Victoria said. Celestine Properties was co-registered 14 months ago. There are 2 principals. Damien's hidden through 3 layers of company structuring. It took me about 4 minutes to find it, which means he wasn't hiding it very carefully, or he didn't think anyone would look. She paused. The penthouse was purchased 18 months ago, furnished over the next 6 months. The first payment toward the furnishing, a wire transfer to a home goods vendor out of Atlanta, was made in December 14 months ago. Evelyn sat very still. December. The same month you lent him $3,800. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside the window, the yard was empty now, the white chairs and flower arrangements gone, only the string lights remaining because they were attached to the house and nobody had asked permission to take them down. In the near dark, the roses along the trellis were the same deep red they always were, and the yard looked almost like itself again, except that it wasn't. He took the money I gave him, Evelyn said, and used it to furnish the apartment where he was living with your best friend, Victoria said. Yes, that's what it looks like. Evelyn set both hands flat on the table. There's more, Victoria said. She wasn't softening it. She wasn't drawing it out either. She was pacing it the way you pace the delivery of information that needs to land completely before the next piece comes in. I pulled a property search on your address. Evelyn, your address is listed as a secondary residence on 2 of Damien's business entity filings. Your name is on those filings, not your signature, your name, which in this context means someone entered it without your authorization. He filed my address as his residence, which creates a legal connection between him and this property that would make removing him significantly more complicated if it ever came to litigation. It's not dispositive on its own, but it's the kind of thing that muddies water, and combined with... She stopped. She clicked something on her laptop. I need you to look at this and tell me if this is your signature. She turned the screen again. It was a credit application, a luxury account, the kind of store card that high-end furniture places issue for large purchases. The address on the application was Damien's Marina Penthouse. The name on the application was Evelyn Christine Whitmore. The signature on the application was not her handwriting. The E was wrong, the loop too tight. The W that followed was flatter than hers. But it was close enough that someone who wasn't looking for the difference wouldn't find it. That's not my signature, Evelyn said. Victoria closed the laptop carefully. No, she said. It's not. She was quiet for a moment. That's fraud, Evelyn. That's the use of forged identification for financial purposes. That's a federal matter. The word hung in the kitchen between them. Evelyn looked at the empty yard through the window. She thought about the 9-hour drive. She thought about the hospital hallway in Savannah and the coffee she'd gotten from a vending machine, and the way she'd sat in a plastic chair for 2 hours afraid that her aunt wasn't going to be okay. And all the while she'd been sitting in that hallway, this had been happening. The planning, the arrangements, the chairs, the flowers, the arch beneath her trellis. He didn't think I was coming back until tomorrow, she said. No, Victoria said. He didn't. They were quiet for a moment. Call someone about the locks tonight, Evelyn said. I already texted a contact on the way over. He'll be here at 7. Good. She stood up from the table. Her body felt strange. Not numb exactly, more like the particular hollowness that follows an impact, the moment after something hits you when your nervous system is still deciding what it felt. I want everything. Every document you can find, every filing, every company, all of it. Victoria nodded. She was already writing again. And I want a record of the signature, Evelyn said. Every account it was used on, every purchase. I want to know exactly what my name was used to buy. I'll have a preliminary report by morning. Evelyn picked up her overnight bag from where she'd left it by the kitchen door and carried it upstairs. She unpacked it slowly and deliberately. Toiletries to the bathroom, clothes to the hamper, the small framed photo of Aunt Clara she'd brought with her back to the bedside table where it lived. She washed her face. She changed her clothes. She moved through the familiar architecture of her own bedroom and let the familiarity do what it could, which wasn't much but was something. Her phone lit up on the nightstand. A text from Damien. She read it without touching the phone. Please let me explain. Followed by, I know what this looks like. Followed, after a gap of 6 minutes, by I love you, Evelyn. Please just talk to me. She left all three unread. 20 minutes later, a text from a number she didn't have saved but recognized. Vanessa. She read it from the notification preview without opening the thread. Evie, I am so sorry. I know there's nothing I can say. Please just let me explain what happened. This isn't what it looks like from your side. I promise. Not what it looks like. Both of them, independently, landing on the same phrase. It looked exactly like what it was. That was the thing about things that looked like what they were. She put the phone face down on the nightstand and lay on top of the covers in the dark. She did not sleep. At 2 a.m, she got up and went back downstairs where Victoria was still at the kitchen table, laptop open, 3 empty coffee cups pushed to one side, legal pad now covered front and back. Victoria looked up. You should sleep, Evelyn said. I should finish, Victoria said, in the tone that meant the conversation was over. Evelyn made tea. She sat at the other end of the table. They worked in parallel. Victoria through documents, Evelyn through the mental inventory of 4 years, recalibrating, reframing, placing things she'd dismissed or explained away into their accurate context. The time Damien had canceled on her 2 months in a row, and she'd told herself it was work. The weekend she'd invited him to Clara's birthday, and he'd sent flowers instead, which she'd thought was sweet. The way he'd occasionally gone quiet on his phone in a manner that hadn't seemed significant at the time, because she'd trusted him. Trust was she was discovering a kind of debt you paid after the fact. At 3:45 in the morning, her phone rang. She looked at the screen. Vanessa. She almost didn't answer. She answered. Evelyn? Vanessa's voice was thick, scratched raw with crying. I know it's the middle of the night. I know I have no right. I need you to know that I'm sorry. I need you to know that this was never supposed to happen this way. You were never supposed to find out like this, Evelyn said. A pause. Yes. When was I supposed to find out? The silence stretched out long enough that the answer became visible in it. You weren't, Evelyn said. I was never supposed to know. That's not... It's more complicated than... When was the wedding scheduled for? Evelyn, tell me. A long, ragged breath on the other end. Tomorrow night. It was supposed to be tomorrow night. You weren't supposed to be back until tomorrow evening, and the ceremony was... Vanessa's voice broke. I'm so sorry, Evie. I'm so sorry. You scheduled it, Evelyn said. Her voice was steady. She could feel Victoria across the table going still, not writing anymore, listening. You knew when I'd be home and you scheduled the ceremony for the night before in my backyard because you knew I'd be gone. I know how it sounds. It sounds like exactly what it is. She paused. Don't call me again tonight, Vanessa. She ended the call. She looked at Victoria. You got that, Victoria said. Not a question. The phone recorded it. Evelyn set the phone on the table between them. She admitted the scheduling was deliberate, that it was planned around my absence. Victoria looked at the phone for a moment. Then she looked at Evelyn. In all the years they'd been family, through the things families go through, loss and money and the particular frictions of people who know each other completely, Victoria had never looked at her quite the way she looked at her now, with something that wasn't sympathy, because Victoria didn't traffic in sympathy, but was something adjacent to it, something harder and more useful. Forward that to me, Victoria said. Right now. Evelyn forwarded it. Victoria opened the forwarded file and listened to it through her laptop speakers in the quiet kitchen, sitting forward with her elbows on the table and her hands laced under her chin. The recording was clear. Kitchen acoustics were clean at that hour. No ambient noise. Vanessa's voice carrying through the phone speaker with enough quality to capture every word. When it ended, Victoria sat back. "This isn't a breakup anymore," she said. "This is evidence." Outside, the first pale suggestion of dawn was beginning to show at the edge of the kitchen window. The backyard was still strung with lights that no one had turned off, glowing amber and warm in the early gray, the roses dark against the trellis. Evelyn looked at it. She thought about the afternoon 2 summers ago when she'd hung those lights alone because Damien had been unavailable and she'd needed them up for a dinner party she was hosting, climbing the ladder by herself and threading the strand through the hooks she'd screwed into the fence line. The particular satisfaction of stepping back at dusk when she'd finished and watching the yard come alive with light. She'd done it herself. She thought about that. Victoria was on the phone now, speaking in the low, precise voice she used when she was calling someone who needed to understand they were being treated as a professional and not a favor. She was reading off file names. She was saying the word federal without any emphasis, which was how you said it when you wanted it to be heard as a fact rather than a threat. Evelyn filled her teacup again. She stood at the kitchen window and looked at the yard. She'd done it herself. All of it. The lights, the trellis, the roses, the house. The life she thought she'd built alongside someone who had been building something else entirely. She was still standing there when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Short, anonymous, no greeting. "You don't know everything yet, but they made sure you couldn't find it easily. Look at Celestine Properties. Go deeper than the holding company." She stared at the text for a long moment. Then she carried her phone to the table where Victoria was still working, set it down in front of her, and waited. Victoria read it. Her jaw tightened fractionally, the closest thing to alarm she displayed. "We need to make some calls this morning," Victoria said, "that I wasn't planning to make until next week." "Who sent that?" Evelyn said. "I don't know yet." Victoria looked up at her. "But someone inside Damien's organization just handed us a door." The dawn came through the kitchen window, pale and inevitable. Neither of them had slept. Neither of them was finished. The locks were changed by 7:15 that morning. By 8, Victoria had a call with a federal financial investigator she'd worked with 2 years prior on a corporate fraud case. By 9, Evelyn had gone through every piece of mail that had arrived in the past 14 months and found 3 credit card statements addressed to her name at her address for accounts she had never opened. Damien called 4 times between 6 and 10. She didn't answer. What she didn't know yet was that the anonymous text had come from inside the DeLuca organization, from someone who had watched Damien build his careful parallel life for 2 years and had finally decided the cost of silence was higher than the cost of speaking. What she didn't know was that Celestine Properties, when you went past the holding company, connected to a network of transactions that the federal investigators would later describe as a sustained pattern of financial deception across multiple jurisdictions. What she didn't know was that Damien, at that exact hour, was on the phone with his own attorneys and that the conversation was not going well. What she did know, standing in her changed-lock kitchen, with the morning light coming through the window and the roses blooming red against the trellis outside, was this. The man she'd loved for 4 years had brought a wedding into her house, and she was going to be the one to decide how it ended. The federal investigator's name was Dennis Hale, and he arrived at Evelyn's house at 10:47 that morning in a gray sedan that looked deliberately unremarkable, the kind of car designed to be forgotten. He was 51 years old with a heavy gray mustache and the particular stillness of a man who had spent 3 decades listening to people lie to him. Victoria had worked with him on a corporate fraud case 2 years prior, a fact she'd mentioned once and not elaborated on, which told Evelyn the working relationship had been productive and the details were not hers to share. Hale sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad of his own and a cup of coffee he didn't touch, and listened to Victoria present the preliminary findings in the flat, organized voice she used when she was giving a court summary. The forged signature on the credit application, the fraudulent residency filings connecting Damien's business entities to Evelyn's home address, the Celestine Properties structure and its links to purchases made in the 14 months since December. The recording from Vanessa's 3:45 phone call, which Victoria played through her laptop speakers without preamble or commentary. Hale listened to the recording without writing anything. When it ended, he asked 2 questions. The first was whether Evelyn had any documentation of the original $3,800 loan. The second was whether she'd kept any of the credit card statements she'd found that morning. She'd kept all of them. She'd put them in a folder. Good. he said. Then he looked at her directly for the first time since he'd sat down, a look that was assessing without being unkind. Ms. Whitmore, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer it completely honestly. All right, she said. How much did you know about Damien DeLuca's business operations? The kitchen was quiet. Victoria didn't move. Outside, a car passed on the street. Okay, le moms. I knew what kind of man he was, Evelyn said. I knew the legitimate side of his business, the real estate holdings, the restaurant group, the import company. I knew those had a surface. I understood there was more underneath. I didn't ask what. That was a choice I made, and I'm not pretending it wasn't. Hale looked at her for another moment. Were you ever compensated in any way from the non-legitimate side of his operations? No. Did your name appear on any non-legitimate accounts prior to the forgeries? Not that I know of, and I would have known. I'm careful with my credit. He made a note. Okay. He capped his pen. I want to be clear about something. The forgeries put you in a specific category. You're a victim of financial identity fraud. That's a clean position. It stays clean as long as everything you just told me is accurate. It is, she said. Then we're going to have a conversation about Celestine Properties. He opened a folder he'd brought with him, which suggested he'd done his own preliminary research before arriving, which suggested Victoria had sent him something last night or early this morning. Because what we're finding in that company structure goes considerably beyond a penthouse apartment. He laid 3 pages on the table, printed from what looked like database records, financial trails with amounts and dates and company names connected by lines that branched and branched again. Evelyn looked at it. How far does it go? We're still mapping it, Hale said, but far enough that the forgeries on your accounts are a small part of a larger pattern. You were used as cover, Ms. Whitmore. Your address, your credit history, your name, they gave his shell companies a legitimacy anchor, a real person with a clean record and a real property at a real address in a good neighborhood. She sat with that for a moment. The weight of it. Not the betrayal. She'd had 9 hours and a sleepless night to begin absorbing the betrayal. But the specific mechanics of it, the way she'd been used not just personally, but structurally, the way her life had been a kind of scaffolding for something she hadn't known she was holding up. What do you need from me? She said. Everything Victoria already has. And your cooperation if this goes where I think it's going to go. You have it. He nodded, picked up his coffee, put it down again. One more thing. DeLuca is going to find out we've been here. Probably before noon. When he does, he's going to make contact. He may come here himself. And? Don't refuse the conversation. Let him talk. Don't confirm or deny anything about this investigation. Just listen. He paused. Can you do that? She looked at him. I've been listening to Damien DeLuca for 4 years, she said. I know how. Hale almost smiled. Almost. He left at 11:30 with the folder Victoria had assembled and a copy of the recorded call on a drive she'd prepared. The gray sedan pulled away from the curb and was gone. Victoria closed the front door and came back to the kitchen. She stood at the counter and looked at Evelyn. How are you doing? She said. Not warmly. Victoria didn't do warm when she thought warm was a distraction. But she asked it, which meant she wanted the actual answer. I don't know yet, Evelyn said. I think I'm still in the part where the information keeps arriving. It's going to keep arriving for a while. I know. She looked at the table. The legal pads, the folder corners, the cold coffee cups. I need to go to work tomorrow. I have 22 kids who need to read. Victoria looked at her for a moment. Okay. This doesn't stop the school year. No, Victoria said. It doesn't. She picked up her bag. I'll be back tonight. Don't open the door for anyone you're not expecting. She left. Evelyn stood alone in her kitchen for the first time since she'd pulled into the driveway the night before. The house settled around her in its familiar way, the particular creak of the old structure adjusting to the late morning warmth, the sound of wind through the magnolias out front. She made a fresh pot of coffee she actually intended to drink. She stood at the kitchen window and looked at the backyard. The yard was clean now. The wedding apparatus had been removed, the chairs in the arch and the ribbon arrangements, all of it taken away in the night by the catering company or by Damien's people. She didn't know which, and it didn't particularly matter. What remained was her yard, her lights, still burning amber in the morning, her roses, her trellis with its slow-climbing tendrils she'd trained over 2 seasons, her fence, which she'd always wanted to paint terracotta, but Damien had told her was too loud for the neighborhood. The fence was still white. That was something she could change. Her phone rang at 12:18. Damien. She let it ring twice, remembering what Hale had said. Let him talk. She picked up. I need to see you. His voice was controlled. She could hear the effort in it, the deliberate management of a man who managed everything. Not to argue, not to ask anything. I just need to see you. No, she said. A beat. Evelyn, I said no, Damien. Not today. Then when? I'll let you know. She ended the call. 30 seconds later, a text. I'm coming over tonight. I'll stand on the porch. You don't have to let me in. She didn't respond. At 1:15, her phone rang again, and this time it was a number she didn't know. And she answered it because Hale had told her to document anything related to the case, and the voice on the other end was not Damien. It was Marcus Webb. She knew who Marcus Webb was the way she knew the names of the other fixtures in Damien's orbit. Not well, not personally, but enough. He was Damien's chief of operations, the man who ran the legitimate side of the business day to day. The one who'd been at every public event she'd attended with Damien, and who had always looked at her with a particular courtesy that she'd read as respect, and now recalibrated slightly. He was 54 years old and originally from Baltimore, and he spoke in a careful, measured way that she'd always assumed reflected legal caution. Ms. Whitmore, he said, I apologize for calling you directly. I know this is an intrusive moment. What do you want, Marcus? A pause. I want to tell you something that I should have told you 8 months ago. And I'm telling you now because what happened last night was wrong. I knew it was wrong when it started, and I said nothing because he stopped, started again. Because saying something had costs I wasn't prepared to pay. She sat down at the kitchen table. Say it. The Celestine Properties structure, he said. It goes back further than 14 months. The original entity was formed 3 years ago. Damien and Vanessa Caldwell have been in a relationship for approximately 3 years. The penthouse was the second property they shared. The first was a rental in Mount Pleasant that was dissolved when he purchased the marina unit. 3 years. She sat with the number. 3 years meant the first year of her and Damien. 3 years meant they had been, the two of them, Damien and Vanessa, they had been together from nearly the beginning. 3 years meant the night she'd met Vanessa at a gallery opening where Damien had introduced them as his girlfriend and his good friend. That night had already been deep inside the lie. Why are you telling me this now? She said. Her voice was steady. She was proud of it. Because you're about to find out anyway, Marcus said. And because I was fond of you. And because what they did to your name, your credit, your address, I didn't know about that when it happened. I found out 4 months ago. I should have told you then. Why didn't you? Silence. Because he's Damien DeLuca, she said. And that has costs. Yes, Marcus said quietly. It does. She absorbed that. The texture of it. The way an entire ecosystem of people had known and been silent. Each one calculating their own version of the math. Each one arriving at the same answer. Stay quiet. Let her keep believing. Marcus, she said, I need you to write down everything you just told me. Dates, names, the first rental address, everything. And I need you to be willing to confirm it to a federal investigator named Dennis Hale. A long pause. Marcus? Yes, he said. I'll do that. She wrote Hale's number from memory and read it out and made Marcus repeat it back. Then she ended the call and sat at the kitchen table and pressed both hands flat on the wood grain and breathed. 3 years. The number sat in her chest like a stone with specific weight and texture. She thought about Vanessa. Not the Vanessa of last night in the white dress. The Vanessa before that. The one she'd known for 12 years, who had been her college roommate for 2 of those years and her closest friend for all of them. Vanessa who brought coffee when Evelyn was sick. Vanessa who had sat with her at the hospital in Savannah 6 months ago when Evelyn's uncle had his first cardiac episode. The same uncle who was Aunt Clara's husband. The same family, all of it connected. Vanessa, who had listened while Evelyn talked about Damien in the early months, who had asked questions about him in a way Evelyn had read as interest in her happiness and now understood differently. She thought about the gallery opening, Damien's hand at her back, easy and proprietary. Vanessa in something green, hugging her hello, shaking Damien's hand. The handshake had been brief, appropriate, the handshake of two people being introduced. She'd watched it happen and read it as exactly what it presented itself as. The performance of it. The precision required. Two people who had been together, who knew each other, touching hands in front of the woman they were both deceiving and making it look like nothing at all. She stood up from the table. She needed to move. She went to the backyard. The spring air was thick and green-smelling, alive with the particular warmth of Charleston in May, and she walked the yard's perimeter the way she sometimes did when she was thinking through a problem, slowly, tracing the fence line, touching the rose stems as she passed. The roses were blooming well this year. She'd pruned them hard in February, and it had paid off, the new growth coming in dense and healthy. She stopped at the trellis and looked at the climbing vine she'd spent 2 seasons training along its structure, the way it had taken hold and spread itself carefully through the wooden grid. She heard the gate. She turned. Damien was standing at the garden gate. He hadn't knocked. The gate had been unlocked because she'd been in the yard, and the simple fact that he'd walked around the side of the house and come through the gate without ringing the bell or calling out made something tighten in her chest. That assumption of access, the casual certainty that the rules of her space were navigable on his terms. "I told you not today," she said. "I know." He came through the gate and stopped about 10 feet from her. He'd changed from the suit. He was wearing dark jeans and a gray shirt, his jacket gone, which made him look more like the version of himself she'd first fallen for, the one that had less armor on. She recognized the tactic even if she wasn't sure it was intentional. "I can't leave it the way it is." "You don't get to decide that." "Evelyn." He took a step toward her. "Just listen to me for—" "Stand there," she said. Sharp. He stopped. "You don't move in this yard until I say so. This is my yard." He stopped. The slight flinch across his face, not a big movement, just a fractional shift at the jaw, was the closest thing to surprise she'd seen from him. He was not a man people spoke to that way. She'd known that for 4 years, and had spent a significant portion of that time softening her own edges to accommodate it, and the fact that she was not softening now, that the accommodation instinct had simply switched off, felt like something structural changing in her, something deep. "How long?" she said. He looked at her. "How long what?" "You know what I'm asking." He didn't answer immediately. He looked at the ground, then back at her, and she could see him making calculations, what she already knew, what she might know, what was safest to admit. She'd watched him make those calculations 100 times and always thought she was watching a man being careful, being thoughtful. Now she knew she'd been watching a man manage the distance between his versions. 2.5 years, he said. She'd expected it to be bad. She'd been sitting with the number 3 years since Marcus's call. 2.5 was close enough that it barely registered as different. "So, from the beginning," she said. "Not from close enough to the beginning that the difference doesn't matter." His jaw set. "It wasn't, Evelyn, what I have with you." "Don't." Her voice was flat. "Don't tell me what you have with me. Don't characterize it to my face after standing in my backyard last night about to marry someone else." He absorbed that. Something shifted in his expression, the calculation dropping for a moment into something raw, something that might have been genuine, though she was aware she no longer trusted her own ability to read him. "I made a mistake," he said. "I made a series of mistakes. I know that. I know there's nothing I can say that makes last night—" He stopped, ran a hand over his jaw. "I panicked. Things moved faster with Vanessa than I planned, and I thought I could keep both things separate. I thought I could figure it out." "You thought I would never find out," she said. He didn't deny it. That was something, maybe, the not denying. "I know how that sounds. Tell me about Celestine Properties." The air between them changed. It was subtle, a microsecond of stillness in him, the kind of stillness that in another context she might have missed, but she was watching for it. "That's a business entity," he said carefully, "that you co-own with Vanessa. There are several entities in that portfolio. Who told you about—" "It doesn't matter who told me. Is it true?" He looked at her steadily. "Yes." "And the Marina penthouse?" "Yes." "And the Mount Pleasant rental before that?" And there it was. The tell she'd been waiting for, the thing that Hale had said would come. The moment when a man who controlled his reactions couldn't. It was barely anything, a slight widening at the eyes. A fraction of a second where the calculation visibly couldn't keep up with the information arriving. "You've been very busy this morning," Damien said. His voice was still level, but it had changed quality. The warmth replaced by something cooler, something that was closer to the voice he used professionally. "I've been very thorough," she said. "There's a difference." He looked at her. The yard was quiet around them. The garden smells of rose and jasmine in the warm air, the string lights overhead burning in the afternoon light. "What do you want?" he said. "I want several things, and I'm going to have all of them." He looked at her for a long moment. "Evelyn, my signature was forged on credit applications, Damien. My name and my address were used in your business filings without my consent. That is a federal crime. There's a federal investigator who was in this kitchen this morning who is now actively working a case." The stillness in him became something different. She watched the professional mask settle into place. The expression he wore when a negotiation became adversarial. The expression that had reportedly made men in other families back down from tables. She'd watched him put that expression on in other contexts, and had always felt a proprietary pride in the fact that he didn't use it with her. He was using it with her now. "I'd like to offer you full financial restitution," he said, "for anything that was done with your name. Everything is restored. Nothing goes forward." "That's not your offer to make." "I'm making it anyway." "Damien." She took one step toward him, just one. "The investigator doesn't work for me. I didn't file a complaint. I handed over evidence. There's a difference. You can't buy your way out of a federal investigation by settling with the victim." His jaw tightened. She watched it. "And even if you could," she said, "you forged my signature, you used my home, you put my address on your shell companies, and you spent 2.5 years lying to my face while your other life was running in parallel." "Boss!" She paused. "I want my money back. All of it, not just the $3,800. I want an accounting of everything my name was used to finance, and I want restitution for all of it. I want your name off every document that connects you to this property, and I want written confirmation of your cooperation with the federal investigation." "Momishin," he stared at her. "That last one is not negotiable." He was quiet for a moment. The mask was still in place, but something behind it was shifting. Not crumbling, Damien DeLuca did not crumble, but reorganizing, the way a structure reorganizes around damage. She could see him processing what she was, now, instead of what she had been. Recategorizing her. She didn't mind. She'd been recategorizing him all night. "I need time to talk to my attorneys," he said. "You have 72 hours, she said. "After that, I stop controlling what I've already given investigators, and I hand over everything, including the recording." "What recording?" "Vanessa called me at 3:45 this morning," Evelyn said. She confirmed that the ceremony was deliberately scheduled around my absence. She knew when I was coming home. She scheduled the wedding for the night before. She paused. "She said you both knew I was never supposed to find out." The mask slipped, just slightly, just enough. "Get off my property," she said. He went. She stood in the yard after the gate closed and listened to his footsteps down the side path, and then the sound of the street door of the black SUV, and then the engine. She stood there until she couldn't hear it anymore. Then she sat down on the back porch step and put her face in her hands, and finally, for the first time, let herself feel the full weight of what had happened. Not the evidence, not the strategy, not the next move, just the weight. 4 years of being loved, or believing she was loved, and the particular grief of discovering that the thing you thought you were holding was something else entirely, a shape you'd projected onto a man who had been elsewhere the whole time. She let it sit on her for about 4 minutes. Then she lifted her head, wiped her eyes once, deliberately, and went back inside. Victoria arrived at 6 with takeout containers, and an expression that meant the day had been productive. "Hale moved faster than I expected," she said, setting the containers on the counter. "Marcus Webb called him directly this afternoon. Webb is cooperating. He has documentation going back to when the first rental was established. 3 years, 4 months ago." "I know about the first rental," Evelyn said. Victoria looked at her. "Marcus told you." "This morning." Victoria opened a container. "Damien came." "This afternoon. He offered financial restitution in exchange for making it go away. You said no." "I told him I couldn't make it go away even if I wanted to, which is true." She sat down. "He's going to fight this." "He's going to try," Victoria said. His attorneys called my office at 4:30. They want to schedule a meeting. She set food in front of Evelyn. I told them their client had 72 hours. Evelyn looked up. How did you know about the 72 hours? Victoria sat down across from her. Because I know you. She picked up her fork. Eat. You haven't eaten today. Evelyn ate. The food tasted like something she was doing for functional reasons, but she ate it because Victoria was right, and because the next days were going to require her to be functional. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it. A text from Vanessa. Can we meet tomorrow? Anywhere you choose. I just need you to hear me. She put the phone face down. Vanessa wants to meet, she said. Victoria chewed. What do you want to do? I don't know yet. She looked at the phone. She was my friend for 12 years. That's... Even with everything, that's... You don't have to decide tonight. No. She turned the phone over again, read the text. But I think I need to see her face when she says it. Victoria looked at her steadily. I need to hear her actual explanation, Evelyn said. Not because it changes anything, but because I've been making her into a monster in my head all day, and I was her friend for 12 years. I owe it to both of us to let her be a person. Victoria was quiet for a moment. All right, she said, but not alone. No, Evelyn agreed. Not alone. Outside, the evening was settling into the yard, the string lights flickering on automatically at dusk the way they always had, the roses deepening to shadow against the trellis. The neighborhood sounds of Charleston evening drifted in. Distant traffic, a dog, someone's music from 2 houses over, the ordinary texture of a city that didn't know or care what was happening in this kitchen. Evelyn's phone rang. She looked at the screen. Unknown number, the same prefix as the morning's anonymous text. She answered. Silence for 2 seconds. Then a woman's voice she didn't know, low and careful. Miss Whitmore, I don't have much time. I work in the finance division of DeLuca Hospitality Group. I've been here for 11 months. In that time, I have processed approximately 40 transactions that I now believe were used to move money through shell accounts connected to Celestine Properties and 2 other entities I can name. She paused. There is a secondary set of books. Not on any server connected to the legitimate business. Physical ledgers. They're kept off-site at a location I can describe. Evelyn looked at Victoria. Victoria had gone still across the table, fork midway to her mouth. Why are you telling me this? Evelyn said. Because I've been watching what they did to you, the woman said, and because I have a daughter, and because the man who runs this organization has been using everyone around him as a tool for so long that he stopped being able to see them as people. A breath. And because I think the ledgers are going to be moved in the next 48 hours. I think someone told him this morning that investigators were involved. Who told him? Evelyn said. A pause. I don't know for certain, but I think it was someone in this building. Evelyn looked at Victoria. Victoria had already opened her laptop. Give me the location, Evelyn said. Right now. The woman gave it, an address in North Charleston, a storage facility, a unit number. Evelyn wrote it on the back of a takeout napkin while Victoria was already dialing Hale. What's your name? Evelyn said. I can't. Not yet. Maybe after. The call ended. Victoria was on the phone. She read the address off the napkin in her flat professional voice, and Evelyn heard Hale's response in fragments from across the table. The word tonight, the word warrant, the word priority. Evelyn sat back in her chair. Her takeout container was still in front of her, half finished, the food gone cold. The evening had gone fully dark outside, the yard glowing with the soft amber of her string lights, steady and warm and unchanged. 48 hours, the woman had said. The ledgers would be moved, which meant tonight or tomorrow something was going to happen that nobody could take back. The investigation had just become something Damien could no longer contain, and Damien DeLuca was a man who, when he could not contain a situation, had spent 30 years ensuring he could. The warrant came through at 11:40 that night. Evelyn knew because Victoria's phone lit up on the kitchen table between them, and Victoria read the screen without picking it up and said, Hale has authorization, in the same tone she might use to confirm a meeting had been scheduled. They had been sitting in the kitchen for 3 hours by then, the takeout containers cleared, 2 fresh coffee cups replacing them, the evening settling into the deep quiet of a Charleston night with all its particular weight. Evelyn didn't say anything. She turned her coffee cup in her hands and looked at the table and thought about the address on the takeout napkin, now photographed and texted, and in the possession of a federal investigator, and what it meant that somewhere in North Charleston a team was moving toward a storage unit that Damien DeLuca had not known anyone knew about until tonight. She thought about the woman on the phone, the low, careful voice. I have a daughter. The way people justified the moment they finally chose honesty. Not because honesty was comfortable, but because the cost of silence had finally exceeded the cost of speaking. Evelyn understood that calculus now, in a way she hadn't 24 hours ago. Go to bed, Victoria said. I can't. Try anyway. She went upstairs. She lay on top of the covers in the dark and stared at the ceiling and listened to the house settle around her, the 12 distinct creaks, and counted them the way she'd counted other things in the last 18 hours. The 10 seconds in the garden gate, the 22 minutes it took Damien to clear the yard, the 4 minutes she'd let herself feel it on the back porch step. Counting was what she had. It kept the edges of things from going soft. She was still awake at 1 in the morning when her phone buzzed. Hale. Unit was empty, cleared recently, maybe 24 to 48 hours ago. We're processing what's left. She read it twice. Then she got up and went downstairs. Victoria was asleep on the couch with her coat over her shoulders and her phone face up on her chest, which meant she'd been waiting for the same message. Evelyn stood in the doorway of the living room and looked at her cousin for a moment. This woman who had driven 43 minutes in the middle of the night without being told why, who had sat at a kitchen table until 3 in the morning building a case from nothing, who was now sleeping on a couch in her work clothes because she hadn't gone home. Evelyn went back to the kitchen. She texted Hale. How recently? His response came in 4 minutes. Best estimate, sometime today. Storage facility has partial camera coverage. Reviewing footage now. She sat down. She put the phone on the table. She thought about what the woman had said. I think someone told him this morning that investigators were involved. This morning. Which meant someone inside the investigation, or adjacent to it, had told Damien that the morning visit from Hale had not been private. Which meant the unit had been cleared in the hours between Hale's 10:40 arrival and tonight's warrant. She thought about who had known. Victoria Hale herself. And whoever Hale had spoken to in the process of getting a warrant cleared on a Sunday evening, which was not nothing. Warrants required judges and clerks and a chain of authorization that had human links. She turned the phone over on the table. She turned it back. She texted Hale. Someone tipped him between this morning and tonight. His response was immediate this time. I know, we're looking at it. She put the phone down and sat in her kitchen and let the implications of that arrive fully, because they had been peripheral until now, hovering at the edge of the more immediate things. But they were no longer peripheral. If someone had tipped Damien, if the federal investigation itself had a leak, then the thing she had believed was her protection was not entirely her protection. The evidence she had handed over was still evidence. The recording, the documents, the forged signatures, those existed regardless of what Damien knew or when he knew it. But the advantage of surprise was gone. And Damien DeLuca, deprived of surprise, was a different kind of problem than the one she'd been calculating for. She did not sleep that night. She went to school in the morning. 22 third graders did not care about federal investigations or forged signatures or the particular weight of discovering that the architecture of your life had been built on someone else's fiction. They cared about the story she was reading them, a chapter book about a girl who trained horses, and about whether Marcus T. had taken Priya's eraser again, and about the fact that the vending machine in the teacher's lounge sometimes gave out 2 bags of chips if you hit the side at exactly the right angle, a fact they had apparently been researching for weeks. Evelyn sat in her reading chair and read aloud and answered questions about horses and mediated the eraser situation and felt, for 45 minutes at a stretch, like herself. That was what the job gave her. She had always known it gave her something, but she had not until now understood precisely what. She left school at 3:15 and drove home and found a car she didn't recognize parked in front of her house. Not a federal vehicle, she knew those now, the deliberately unremarkable sedans. This was a silver Audi, expensive, the kind of car that announced money without announcing brand loyalty. She parked in her driveway and sat for a moment, and then got out. The woman sitting on her porch steps was not someone she had ever seen before. She was maybe 45, Latina, dark hair cut short and precise, wearing a blazer over dark jeans and the particular expression of a person who has been waiting without minding the wait, because they came prepared for it. She stood when she saw Evelyn coming up the walk. Ms. Whitmore, she said. My name is Renata Voss. I'm an attorney. I represent a set of interests connected to the DeLuca organization. She paused. Not Damien DeLuca specifically. Other interests. Evelyn stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. Whose? I'm not at liberty to name them at this stage. But I'm here because the investigation that began yesterday has implications that extend beyond your personal situation, and there are parties who would like to ensure your cooperation is calibrated correctly. Calibrated, Evelyn said. You've provided evidence to a federal investigator, Renata said. The scope of that investigation is expanding. The parties I represent are invested in a specific outcome of that expansion. Evelyn looked at her steadily. Are you asking me to limit my cooperation with federal investigators? I'm suggesting that your cooperation be focused on the specific crimes committed against you personally, Renata said. The forgeries, the financial misappropriation. Those are legitimate grievances, and our clients have no interest in protecting them. What we're asking is that you not provide information pertaining to the broader operational structure of— No, Evelyn said. Renata paused. Ms. Whitmore, you drove here to ask me to help protect people I don't know from an investigation into crimes I didn't commit, Evelyn said. The answer is no, and I'd like you to leave my property. Something moved behind Renata's professional surface. Not quite anger, something more clinical, a reassessment. You should understand that the investigation you're cooperating with has interests of its own that are not necessarily aligned with yours. The federal investigator you've been speaking with, Dennis Hale, has been building a case against the DeLuca organization for 2 years. Your situation is an access point for him, a convenient one. I know that, Evelyn said. Renata looked at her. You know, Hale told me himself, the first morning. She looked at the woman steadily. He told me I was a convenient access point. He told me his investigation was broader than my personal situation. He told me to cooperate completely because my clean position depends on it. He told me all of this before I handed over anything. She paused. Your clients have been watching this since yesterday, and they still sent you here believing I didn't know that. That tells me something about how much they've been paying attention. Renata was quiet for a moment, then she said, Who told Damien about the investigators yesterday morning? The question landed with the precision of something designed to land that way. Evelyn kept her face still. I don't know what you mean, she said. Yes, you do. Renata picked up the leather bag at her feet. Hale has a leak in his authorization chain. He knows it. He's been managing it for several months. The parties I represent are not responsible for it, but they are aware of it. And they want you to know that the information you've given Hale may not remain as protected as you believe. She came down the porch steps, stopped beside Evelyn on the walk. Your cousin is very good, she said quietly. She built a solid preliminary case in under 8 hours. That's impressive work. But there are documents in that file that connect to transactions my clients have an interest in. And if those documents enter an open federal record, the consequences for people adjacent to this investigation become unpredictable. She paused. We are not threatening you. We are asking you to be precise. She walked to the silver Audi and got in and drove away. Evelyn stood on her front walk for a moment. Then she went inside and called Victoria. Someone just came to my house, she said when Victoria picked up. An attorney named Renata Voss. A beat. Say that again. Renata Voss. She said she represents interests connected to the DeLuca organization, not Damien specifically. Victoria's silence had a particular quality to it, the quality of someone who has just recognized a name. You know her, Evelyn said. I know of her, Victoria said. She's not a criminal defense attorney. She's a private counsel who operates in— She manages interests, the kind of interests that exist in the space between legitimate and otherwise. A pause. Who sent her? Did she say? She wouldn't name clients. Rival organization, Victoria said, almost to herself. Has to be. Someone who has been watching Damien's operation and saw an opening in this. Another pause. Evelyn, what did she ask you? To limit my cooperation to the crimes against me personally, to not provide information about the broader operational structure. What did you say? I said no. Good. But there was something in Victoria's voice, a tightness that hadn't been there before. I need to tell you something. I was going to tell you tonight, but I need to tell you now. Evelyn sat down in the hallway. Say it. The documents from Celestine Properties, the ones I pulled and gave to Hale. I've been going deeper into the structure today. the way the anonymous text said to. And I found there are layers to this, Evelyn. The shell companies don't just connect to Damien's holdings. There are transactions that run through accounts that connect to a separate entity. A bigger one. She paused. I think Celestine Properties wasn't just a way to hide the relationship with Vanessa. I think it was a financial vehicle for something larger. Something Damien was running in partnership with other people. Renata Voss's clients, Evelyn said. Possibly. Or people who know those clients. The point is that the investigation Hale is running has always been about more than Damien, and the financial crimes committed with your name, the forgeries, the shell accounts, those are connected to the larger structure, which means you're connected to it. Your name is in those accounts, and even though you're a victim, my name is in accounts connected to organized financial crime, Evelyn said. Yes. She sat in the hallway in the quiet house. Outside, the late afternoon light was going golden through the front windows. She could hear traffic on the street, and somewhere down the block a lawnmower, the ordinary sounds of an ordinary Monday. How bad? She said. Your position is still clean, Victoria said quickly. You're a victim. The forgeries establish that clearly. But the optics are complicated, Evelyn. If this goes to a broad federal prosecution and the documents become public record, your name is going to appear in connection with a financial network that goes significantly above Damien DeLuca. And the school, Evelyn said. Silence. If my name is in those records, she said, if it becomes public, the school district. I don't know yet, Victoria said. I'm working on it. Evelyn pressed her free hand flat against the hallway floor. The wood was cool and solid under her palm, the old grain of the Victorian house, her grandmother's house. She focused on it. Victoria, she said, how did my name get on those accounts, the ones connected to the larger network? If I never signed anything, the same way the credit applications were signed, Victoria said, someone forged you into it. But the question is, when? And whether Damien did it, or whether someone else did it with or without his knowledge. Why would someone else do it? Because if this ever surfaced, having a clean civilian's forged identity in the accounts makes the whole structure look less like an organized criminal enterprise and more like complicated financial relationships between private individuals. She paused. Your name wasn't just useful to Damien. Your name was useful to everyone connected to this. A school teacher, clean credit, real property, real identity. It creates cover, Evelyn said. Yes. She sat with that. The specific ugliness of it, not just that she'd been used by a man she loved, but that she'd been useful, that her cleanness, her ordinariness, her 32 years of careful living had been a resource someone had extracted without her knowledge or consent. I need to talk to Hale, she said. I already called him. He's coming tonight. She stood up from the hallway floor. She walked to the kitchen. She stood at the window and looked at the backyard, at the roses and the lights and the trellis, and breathed. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she recognized now. The anonymous one. The same one that had sent the address of the storage unit, the unit that had been empty. The text said, storage unit was a decoy. The real ledgers were never there. He moved them 6 months ago when he first suspected the investigation was getting close. What Hale is building his case on is incomplete. There's a second location, but I can't tell you where yet. Not until I know who leaked the warrant. She read it 3 times. Then she screenshot it and sent it to Victoria and then to Hale. Hale's response came in 90 seconds. Call me now, she called. The storage unit was deliberate, Hale said without preamble. The professional calm in his voice had a different texture than usual. Tighter, like something wound closer to its limit. We thought we missed it by hours. We didn't miss it. It was staged. There was enough residual material to make it look recently cleared, but the unit has been empty for months. Someone led us there knowing we'd move on it and show our hand. The anonymous contact, Evelyn said. Either the contact was used, fed that information to pass to you without knowing it was false, or the contact is running 2 sides of this. He paused. I don't know which yet. The contact just texted again, she said. She says the real ledgers were moved 6 months ago. She says there's a second location, but she won't give it until she knows who leaked the warrant. Hale was quiet for 3 seconds. She's testing us, he said. She wants to see who we tell, and whether it gets back. Is that a problem? It's a problem if the leak is someone I can't identify in the next 12 hours. He paused. Miss Whitmore. I need to ask you something I should have asked yesterday. Ask. Vanessa Caldwell, what do you actually know about her finances? The question arrived in a way she hadn't expected, which told her it was the question that mattered. She's a marketing consultant, Evelyn said. She runs her own firm. Small, 3 or 4 clients at a time, mostly hospitality and retail. She makes good money. She has an apartment in the South of Broad neighborhood that she's rented for about 4 years. She paused. Why? Because Vanessa Caldwell's financial profile is considerably more complex than that, Hale said. Her consultancy has billed approximately $2.3 million in fees over the last 3 years to clients that are shells. Not DeLuca shells, different shells. Shells that connect to the same broader network we've been identifying through the Celestine documents. Evelyn stood very still. Vanessa Caldwell is not just a woman who had an affair with your boyfriend, Hale said. She is a participant in the financial structure that used your identity. We believe she may have been the one who initially identified you as a useful identity anchor, your credit profile, your property, your clean record. We believe the relationship between her and DeLuca may have begun as a professional collaboration before it became personal. The kitchen was very quiet. She chose me, Evelyn said. The words came out flat and strange, like something read aloud from a document. She cultivated our friendship because we don't know the full timeline yet, Hale said carefully. It's possible the friendship was genuine initially. It's possible both things were true at once. People are, don't, Evelyn said. He stopped. She stood at her kitchen window and looked at the backyard, the roses, the lights, the trellis that had taken 2 seasons. She thought about 12 years. She thought about the gallery opening where Vanessa had shaken Damien's hand with the perfect performance of a stranger. She thought about every conversation, every shared coffee, every hospital waiting room, all of it running now through the new filter, the one that recontextualized everything, that turned the texture of 12 years into something she no longer recognized. She had told herself she owed it to both of them to let Vanessa be a person. She thought about that now with a very different understanding of what kind of person Vanessa was. I agreed to meet her tomorrow, Evelyn said. I know, Hale said. Victoria told me. Should I still go? A pause. Yes, he said. But I need you to understand something before you do. The investigation is at a point where there are things we need from this meeting that go beyond what you personally need from it, and I need to know if you can do that. What things? Vanessa knows where the ledgers are, Hale said. Or she knows who does. She's been part of the structure for 3 years. If she's reaching out to you, if she wanted to meet before we formally approached her, it means she's scared. It means she's calculating whether she's better off talking to you than talking to us. He paused. You're the only person she might actually tell the truth to. Evelyn thought about 12 years. She thought about what it cost. I need to know one more thing first, she said. What? Was anything real, she said. The friendship. Was there any part of it that was, did she ever actually? She stopped herself. She knew the question was unanswerable. She knew that even Hale, with all his files, couldn't tell her whether the 12 years contained a single genuine moment, because that was not the kind of thing that appeared in financial records or property filings. That was the kind of thing that lived in the hours between evidence, in the space where 2 people were just 2 people, and that space was gone now, sealed off, inaccessible. Never mind, she said. Ms. Whitmore. I'll go to the meeting, she said. Tell me what you need. He told her. She listened and she wrote it down, and her hand was steady on the pen, and she did not let the steadiness cost her anything she couldn't afford to spend, because the next 24 hours were going to require everything she had left. And she was not finished yet, not by a long distance. But the woman who had walked through the garden gate 2 nights ago, counting to 10 in the amber light of her own backyard, and the woman who was standing in this kitchen writing down the terms of a federal operation were not quite the same woman anymore. And the distance between them was something she couldn't measure yet. Something she would have to understand later, when there was time. When it was, she didn't sleep again. She sat at the kitchen table with Hale's instructions written on 3 pages of Victoria's legal pad, and read them until she had them in a place deeper than memory, until they were reflex, until the sequencing of what she needed to do and say and not say in the cafe tomorrow lived in her body the way certain things live in the body, not thought, just available. Victoria had gone home at midnight. She'd tried to stay. Evelyn had made her leave because there was a point past which another person's presence became its own kind of pressure. and she needed the next several hours to be quiet, to let the full shape of what she was walking into take form without anyone in the room managing her reaction to it. She knew what Hale needed from the meeting. She knew what it would cost to get it. She sat with both of those things and let them exist simultaneously and did not try to resolve the space between them. At 6 in the morning, she showered and dressed and ate half a piece of toast standing over the sink. She looked at her face in the bathroom mirror. The specific look of someone who has not slept in 36 hours. The skin drawn slightly tight, the eyes doing more work than usual to appear present. She looked at it clinically, the way you look at a tool you're about to use hard, checking for structural integrity. She looked okay. She drove to the cafe at 8:15, 45 minutes before Vanessa was supposed to arrive, because Hale had asked her to arrive early and she had agreed to follow his instructions completely. She chose a table near the back with sight lines to the door and the street window both, which was not something she would have known to do a week ago and which she now did without thinking about it. The way the last 3 days had quietly rewritten certain instincts. She ordered coffee and sat with her hands around the cup and watched the door. Vanessa arrived at 8:57, 3 minutes early, which was not like Vanessa, who was characteristically and unapologetically late to everything, and the earliness registered as information. She was wearing almost no makeup, which was also not like Vanessa, who wore makeup the way some people wore armor, and her dark hair was down around her face instead of pinned, and she was thinner than Evelyn remembered, which was only 4 days ago, but grief and guilt and fear could do that to a person in 4 days, could take the weight out of them. She looked terrible. She looked, Evelyn thought, like someone who had not slept either. Vanessa saw her from across the room, and her face did something complicated. Relief and grief, and something close to shame, all of it crossing her expression in the 2 seconds it took her to cross the cafe and sit down across from Evelyn. She didn't hug her. She seemed to understand that a hug was not a thing that was available. She sat down. She put her hands on the table. She looked at Evelyn. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I almost didn't," Evelyn said. Vanessa nodded. That was it. Just the nod, no protest, no softening. The absence of protest was itself interesting. Evelyn filed it. The server came. Vanessa ordered tea she wouldn't drink. The server left. The cafe noise was low around them, the Tuesday morning hum of a neighborhood coffee place, the grinder going behind the counter, someone's laptop keys, the door opening and closing. "Say what you came to say," Evelyn said. Vanessa looked at the table. "I don't know where to start." "Try the beginning." A breath. "The beginning." She turned her teacup in her hands the same way Evelyn had turned her coffee cup all night. "I met Damien before you did. Not long before, maybe 3 months. It was through a client referral, a hospitality group that wanted rebranding consultation. He was the investor behind the group." She paused. There was something between us immediately. I know how that sounds. I know you don't want to hear it, but I'm trying to be honest with you." "Keep going," Evelyn said. "We were involved for about 6 weeks before he met you, and then he met you, and he didn't end things with me. He just started managing both simultaneously. I knew about you before you knew about me." She stopped, swallowed. "I knew your name before you knew I existed." Evelyn kept her face still. Her coffee was getting cold. She didn't touch it. "I should have ended it," Vanessa said. "I know that. I tell myself I would have, eventually, if things had stayed, but they didn't stay simple. The business relationship with Damien became something else. He needed a consultant for certain account structures. Shell entities. I had the expertise and I needed the revenue, and it started as a professional arrangement that was not legal, Evelyn. I know that. I'm not pretending it was." She looked up. "I got in deep before I understood how deep." Bam. "When did you understand?" Evelyn said. "About 18 months ago, when Celestine became connected to the other accounts, the bigger network." Her voice dropped. "I didn't know about that at the beginning. I thought I was helping structure some domestic shell companies for tax purposes. That's what he told me. By the time I understood what the shells were actually connected to, I was already inside it." "And my name," Evelyn said. Vanessa looked at the table. "Vanessa." Her voice was flat. "My name on the accounts, my signature on the credit applications, my address on the filings. Whose idea?" Vanessa's jaw tightened. His. Did you know when it happened? A pause that was 3 seconds too long. Yes, Vanessa said. Her voice had gone very quiet. I knew. The cafe kept making its cafe sounds around them. Evelyn's heart was beating at a pace she was aware of, steady but elevated, the way her body had been running on since Saturday night, this continuous low register alert, and she breathed through it the way she'd been breathing through everything. You knew he was putting my name on criminal financial structures, Evelyn said. I told him it was wrong. I told him to use a different identity, someone who wasn't your friend. Vanessa's eyes went bright. She didn't cry. She looked like someone holding crying back through sheer determination. Yes. But he used me anyway. He said you were the cleanest option, that your credit profile and your property were exactly what the accounts needed to look legitimate, that you'd never know, that you'd never... She stopped. Her voice had started to break. She stopped it. He said it wouldn't hurt you, that it was a formality. Forging someone's identity into organized financial crime is not a formality. I know that. Hard. Flat. I know what it is. I'm not defending it. Evelyn looked at her. The woman across the table was someone she had known for 12 years. She tried to hold those two things at once, 12 years and this, and found they did not coexist easily, that the weight of one kept displacing the other, and that this was probably going to be true for a long time. There's something else, Vanessa said. I know, Evelyn said. Vanessa looked at her sharply. Hale told me last night, Evelyn said, about the consultancy fees, about the shells your billings ran through. Vanessa's face went gray, not a metaphor. The blood actually left it, a visible draining that made her look for a moment like someone much older. He knows. He's known for a while. He's been building the case. Evelyn set her cup down carefully. Vanessa, the ledgers, the real ones, not the storage unit. Where are they? The silence that followed was the longest one yet. Evelyn counted it. 7 seconds. If I tell you that, Vanessa said, I am done. Everything I've built, everything... You're already done, Evelyn said. Whether you tell me or not. The question is whether you're done as a cooperating witness or done as a defendant. She paused. Hale offered cooperation terms last night. They're still available this morning. They will not be available indefinitely. Vanessa's hands were shaking on the table. Small, fine tremors, the kind that came from exhaustion and fear, and the body finally presenting its bill for 3 days of sustained crisis. Evelyn watched them and felt something that was not sympathy exactly, but was adjacent to it, and pushed it to the side because she could not afford it right now. He'll know I talked, Vanessa said. The moment those ledgers are found, he'll know it was me. Damien, not just Damien, her voice dropped to almost nothing. The other network, the one behind Celestine. Evelyn, those people are not, they're not like Damien. Damien is dangerous, but he has rules. He has a code. These people don't. She looked at Evelyn directly. Do you understand what I'm telling you? I understand, Evelyn said. I am not exaggerating the risk. I know you're not. She held Vanessa's gaze. I also know you're already on their radar. The moment investigators start pulling the Celestine threads, you're visible regardless. The only variable is whether you're visible as someone who helped or someone who didn't. Vanessa looked at the table. Her jaw was working. Nessa. The name came out before Evelyn decided to say it, the old diminutive 12 years of it, and she watched it land on Vanessa's face with a precision she hadn't intended. I'm not doing this for him. I'm doing it because my name is on those accounts. My name. I need this to end, and I need it to end in a way that doesn't drag me down with it. Vanessa looked up. Something moved behind her eyes. Recognition, maybe. The understanding that this was not Evelyn being used by federal investigators, was not Evelyn performing cooperation for Hale's purposes, was Evelyn fighting for something that was specifically and personally hers. There's a property in McClellanville, Vanessa said. About an hour north. It's listed under a name, Halcyon Agricultural Holdings. It's supposed to be a farm investment, never developed. There's a house on the property that Damien has used as a secondary office. She paused. The ledgers are there, in the house, in a built-in safe behind a panel in the back bedroom. She paused again. The combination is the month and year of his mother's death. I don't know the exact date, but I know she died in March 1987. Evelyn had her phone under the table. She was not recording. Hale had been clear that the recording needed to be his, properly evidenced. But she was texting the details as they arrived to a number Hale had given her. A clean line, 3 words at a time. The address, the property name, the location in the house. How many people know about that location? Evelyn said. Damien, Marcus Webb, and 2 people from the other network whose names I don't know. I only know them by... They use pseudonyms in all communications. She pressed her hands flat on the table to stop the trembling. And me. Now you. Okay. Evelyn looked at her. Call Hale. Right now, from this table. I'll give you the number. Vanessa looked at her. And if I do, then you have cooperation terms and the protection that comes with them. She paused. You're not safe where you are, Vanessa. Not from the investigation and not from the people behind Celestine. The only place you're safe is inside a cooperation agreement. Vanessa looked at the table. She looked at her shaking hands. She looked at Evelyn. I'm sorry, she said. It came out stripped of everything. No performance, no hedging, just the 2 words. Evelyn looked at her for a moment. I know, she said. Not forgiveness, not absolution, just acknowledgement, just the fact of it, landing between them. She wrote Hale's number on a napkin and pushed it across the table. Vanessa picked it up. She dialed. While the phone rang, Evelyn stood and picked up her bag and her cold coffee and walked to the door. She pushed it open and stepped into the morning air. The street was bright, an ordinary Tuesday in Charleston, people going places with coffee cups and dogs and all the ordinary paraphernalia of morning, and she stood on the sidewalk and breathed it. Her phone buzzed. Hale. Got your texts. Moving on the McClellanville property now. Stay available. She texted back. She's calling you from inside the cafe. Cooperating. A pause. Then, good work. She pocketed the phone. She stood on the sidewalk. She thought about the word work and what it meant for the morning she'd just had. The clinical management of 12 years of friendship for a federal investigation, and felt something rise briefly in her chest. Not regret, not quite, but the specific cost of having done something necessary and hard, and not being able to call it anything other than what it was. She walked to her car. She drove. She was on the bridge over the Ashley River when her phone rang through the car speakers. Not Hale, not Victoria, not the anonymous number. Damien. She almost let it go. She answered. She called him. His voice was different. Not the controlled version, not the mask, not the professional register she'd watched him manage all weekend. This was something stripped down, raw at the edges, the voice of a man who had just watched the last piece of his structure give way. Vanessa just called the federal investigator. I know, Evelyn said. A silence. The car moved over the bridge, the river wide and gray-green below, the city receding behind her. You were there, he said. Yes. You... He stopped, started again. You walked her through it. I told her the truth, Evelyn said. She made her own choice. Evelyn. His voice broke on the second syllable. Not performance. She would have known performance. She'd been learning to read him for 4 years. And this was not performance. This was the actual man, the one underneath the architecture of control. Everything I built, everything, it's gone. Yes, she said. Is there anything I could have done? Any way this could have... No, she said. There isn't. She kept her eyes on the road. The bridge ended. The city opened up around her. You should call your attorney, Damien. You should stop calling me and call your attorney and cooperate with Hale's investigation before the McClellanville property is breached, because cooperation before evidence is recovered is worth more than cooperation after. A long silence. That's it, he said. That's all you have. That's advice, she said. Genuine advice. Take it or don't. She paused. Don't call me again. She ended the call. Her hands were steady on the wheel. The city moved around her, the palmetto trees and the old brick buildings and the particular light of a Charleston morning in spring, and she drove through it and felt the silence of the car settle around her like something she'd earned. Her phone buzzed. Victoria. Hale just called me. They're executing the McClellanville search warrant within the hour. Damien's attorneys are already negotiating. It's moving fast. She texted back, I know. Victoria, how are you? She thought about how to answer that. She thought about the cafe, about Vanessa's shaking hands, about the word cooperation, and the word work, and the bridge over the Ashley River. She thought about 4 years and 12 years, and the things that lived in the hours between evidence that no one could recover for her. She texted, moving. She drove. She was back on Beaumont Street, turning into her driveway, when she saw the second car. Not the gray Federal sedan, and not the silver Audi, and not any car she'd seen before. A dark town car parked across the street, engine running. She parked. She sat in her car for a moment, looking at it. The town car didn't move. She got out. She walked to her front porch. She did not look back at the town car because she had learned in the last 3 days that looking at things directly was sometimes less useful than letting them believe you hadn't noticed. She went inside. She locked the door. She went to the kitchen window, approaching from the side, and looked at the street through the angle of the window frame. The town car was still there. Her phone rang. Unknown number, different from the anonymous contact's prefix, different area code entirely. She answered. A man's voice, very calm. The kind of calm that was not composure, but was the absence of any need for composure. The kind of calm that came from a specific and total confidence in one's own position. Ms. Whitmore, he said, you've had a very productive few days. Who is this? She said. Someone who has been watching your situation with considerable interest, and with, I'll admit, some admiration. A pause. You should know that the McClellanville property has already been cleared. The ledgers are not there. They haven't been there since last night. Her hand tightened on the phone. Damien received a call at 11:47 last night, the man said, approximately 1 hour after your federal investigator received the search warrant for the storage unit. Someone in Hale's authorization chain made a second call. The ledgers were moved before dawn. He paused. Mr. Hale is about to execute a warrant on an empty property for the second time in 24 hours. His case, without those ledgers, is considerably weaker than he believes. Why are you telling me this? She said. Because the ledgers contain information that is damaging to certain interests I represent, he said. And because Damien DeLuca, in his current state of panic, is likely to use those ledgers as leverage in his cooperation negotiations with Hale in a way that would be inconvenient. He paused. I'd like those ledgers to disappear entirely, and I believe you may be in a position to help ensure that outcome. You want me to interfere with a federal investigation? She said. I want you to consider, the man said, measured and unhurried, that your name appears in those ledgers in ways that are not entirely flattering, regardless of how clearly you're established as a victim. That a prolonged public prosecution in which those documents enter the record is not in your personal interest. That your position at an elementary school, your community standing, your grandmother's house, these things exist in a world that does not always draw fine distinctions between victim and participant. Her heart was beating hard. She could feel it in her throat. And if I help you, she said, your name disappears from everything, every record, every filing, every account, completely clean. Damien takes full responsibility for the forgeries on the record. The school never hears a thing. The ledgers vanish, and the broader investigation loses its foundation and closes within 6 months. He paused. You go back to your life, your roses, your children's literacy program, your grandmother's house. The street outside was quiet. The town car sat at the curb. She had 3 seconds in which the offer was fully real. The weight of it sitting in her chest, the specific gravity of a way out that was clean and complete, and asked only that she look away from something she had not built and did not own, that she protect herself by simply stepping back. She thought about 22 third graders and a chapter book about horses. She thought about her grandmother's house. She thought about her name, her actual name, the one she'd carried 32 years, the one her grandmother had given her, the one that appeared on a teaching certificate and a deed of property and a federal investigations evidence file because someone had decided her cleanness was a resource to be extracted. She thought about the woman who had stood in the garden gate and counted to 10. No, she said. A pause. The first pause the man had taken. Ms. Whitmore. I said no. Her voice was very steady. She was almost surprised by how steady it was. I'm going to hang up now, and then I'm going to call Dennis Hale and tell him about this conversation, and then I'm going to text him the license plate number of the town car parked outside my house, which I assume belongs to someone connected to you. She paused. And then I'm going to go inside my kitchen and make coffee and wait for this to be over. A silence. You understand what you're choosing, the man said. Yes, she said. For the first time in about 4 years, I understand exactly what I'm— Yes, she said. For the first time in about 4 years, I understand exactly what I'm choosing. She ended the call. She stood in her kitchen for 3 seconds with the phone in her hand and her heart hitting her ribs at a pace she could feel in her fingertips. Then she went to the kitchen window, staying to the side of the frame, and looked at the street. The town car was still there. She photographed the license plate through the window glass, the image slightly distorted by the angle, but clear enough. She texted it to Hale with 3 words: "Outside my house." His response came in under a minute. "Don't go outside, we're running the plate now." She texted back, "They know about McClellanville. The ledgers were moved last night. Someone called Damien at 11:47, right after your warrant came through." A longer pause this time. 40 seconds. "I know," he wrote. "We found the property empty 20 minutes ago. I was going to call you." Then, "The plate is registered to a holding company. We know whose. Stay inside." She put the phone on the counter. She put both hands flat on the tile and breathed slowly and deliberately, in through the nose, out through the mouth, the way she breathed when 22 third graders were simultaneously at maximum volume and she needed to find the floor under her feet. It worked in classrooms. It worked now, mostly. She made coffee. It was something to do with her hands and her attention, and she needed both occupied, because the alternative was standing in her kitchen thinking about what the man on the phone had said about her name appearing in the ledgers in ways that were not entirely flattering, and what that meant for the specific future she'd been building in the 3 days since she'd come home early from Savannah. The town car left at 9:47. She watched it from the window. It pulled from the curb without hurry and drove north on Beaumont Street and disappeared around the corner. She didn't know if that meant Hale's people had intervened, or if it meant the man on the phone had simply decided to let her decision stand and adjust his approach accordingly, and not knowing felt like the right amount of uncertainty to sit with. Hale arrived at 11. He came alone this time, without the legal pad and the untouched coffee, and he sat at her kitchen table with his hands laced in front of him and looked at her with the expression of a man delivering a full accounting. "The plate belongs to a holding company connected to an individual we've had a file on for 11 years, he said. "The call you received this morning constitutes witness tampering and obstruction. Both are federal charges. The fact that you refused and called me immediately makes you clean." He paused. "Cleaner." "What about the ledgers?" she said. "We know they were moved. We know the approximate window. We have surveillance footage from a truck rental company in North Charleston showing a vehicle registered to a DeLuca entity picking up equipment at 11:15 last night, approximately 30 minutes after the warrant was executed on the storage unit." He paused. "We know where they went." She looked at him. "Where?" "That's something I can't tell you yet." He held her gaze. "What I can tell you is that the warrant for that second location was filed this morning through a different authorization chain. One I chose personally. It's executing this afternoon." She absorbed that. The leak in his chain, the call at 11:47, Damien receiving the warning and moving fast, and Hale already having identified the leak and rerouted around it. "Who was it?" she said. "The leak. A clerk in the district judge's office who has been on DeLuca's payroll for approximately 8 months. She was arrested this morning." He paused. "These things move faster once they start moving." She looked at her coffee cup. "Is my name in the ledgers?" "Yes," he said. "But in the context of the full investigation, your name appears in the same category as 6 other identities that were used without consent as legitimacy anchors for the account structure. The pattern is documented. The forgeries are documented. Your status as a victim is not in question." He paused. "However—" "Say it." "The name of the man who called you this morning will become part of the federal record when this case is prosecuted. His organization is the larger network behind Celestine. The investigation is going to expand significantly. It's going to take time. Federal prosecutions of this scope typically run 2 to 4 years before resolution." He looked at her directly. "Your name will appear in documents that become public record, not as a defendant, not in a way that suggests culpability, but it will appear." She sat with that. 2 to 4 years. "The school," she said. "I spoke with Victoria this morning before I came here. She's already prepared a document, a clear summary of your status, the nature of the forgeries, and the formal federal designation of your position as a victim of financial identity fraud. It's ready to be presented to your district administration today if you choose to do it proactively." He paused. "Victoria's recommendation, and mine, is that you get ahead of it. Your own mouth, your own words, before anyone reads something in a newspaper. She thought about her principal, a practical woman named Diane, who had been running the school for 12 years and who had seen most things and was not easily rattled. She thought about the conversation. She thought about 22 third graders who were going to need her at her desk tomorrow morning, regardless of what the federal record contained. "I'll go today," she said. "This afternoon." Hale nodded. He reached into his jacket and put an envelope on the table. "This is a formal letter from my office confirming your status as a cooperating victim witness. It's on official letterhead. It says exactly what needs to be said and nothing else." He paused. "You've done everything right, Ms. Whitmore. From the first morning, I want you to know that." She looked at the envelope. "It doesn't feel like everything right," she said. "It feels like a series of very hard choices made under pressure." "Those are the same thing," Hale said, "in my experience." He left at 11:40. She stood on the porch and watched the gray sedan pull away, and thought about how quickly the unremarkable had become familiar. The federal investigators, the warrants, the authorization chains and ledger locations, and cooperating witnesses, all of it part of her week now, folded into the structure of days that had begun with a 9-hour drive and violin music from her backyard. She went inside and called Diane. The conversation lasted 22 minutes. She told it plainly, without hedging, with the vocabulary Hale had given her. Financial identity fraud, cooperating victim witness, federal investigation, proactive disclosure. Diane listened without interrupting, which was something Evelyn had always valued about her. When Evelyn finished, there was a silence of about 10 seconds. "Come in tomorrow morning," Diane said. "Bring the letter, we'll document it properly, and that's the end of it as far as this school is concerned." "You're sure?" Evelyn said. "You've been here 6 years," Diane said. "You have 22 kids who are reading above grade level because of you. Come in tomorrow." A pause. "And Evelyn, I'm sorry this happened to you." She held the phone for a moment after the call ended. Then she put it down and sat at the kitchen table in the quiet house and let the specific relief of that conversation move through her, the practical, transactional relief of a necessary thing going well, without dressing it up as more than what it was. 3 days later, Damien's attorneys reached out to Victoria. The terms they proposed were close to everything Evelyn had demanded on her back porch. Full financial restitution, complete surrender of any legal claim to the Beaumont Street property, and documented cooperation with the federal investigation. There were 2 additions that had not been in her original demand: a written acknowledgement of the forgeries and their specific impact on her financial identity, and a formal legal statement establishing her clean standing in relation to all Celestine-connected accounts. Victoria called her with the terms. She read them out in full, without editorial comment, which was how Victoria communicated when she thought the answer was obvious. "Yes," Evelyn said. "To all of it?" "To all of it. I'll have the documentation ready for signatures by Thursday." The restitution was delivered through attorneys on a Thursday afternoon, 29 days after the night she'd come home early. It was not a personal encounter. It was a wire transfer confirmation and a set of signed documents that Victoria walked her through at the kitchen table. Each page explained in full before she signed, nothing accepted on trust. She initialed the acknowledgement of the forgeries. She signed the clean standing statement. She countersigned the property surrender confirmation and watched Victoria notarize it. When it was done, Victoria set the pen down and looked at her. "That's it," Victoria said. "That's it," Evelyn agreed. They sat in the kitchen for a moment in the quiet of it. "I want to paint the fence," Evelyn said. Victoria looked at her. "Now?" "Not now, this weekend." She looked out the window at the white fence line. "Terracotta. I've always wanted terracotta." Victoria looked at the fence. "It'll look good," she said. Evelyn met Vanessa one more time. Not arranged, not planned. A chance encounter at the grocery store 6 weeks after the cafe. A Tuesday afternoon in the produce section. The ordinary geography of a city that was not large enough to make avoiding a person possible indefinitely. Vanessa was thinner than the cafe, which had already been thinner than before. She was wearing no makeup again and her hair was pulled back, and she was standing in front of the apples with the particular stillness of someone trying to take up as little space as possible. She saw Evelyn first. Evelyn watched the recognition arrive on her face, the slight flinch, the instinct to retreat overridden by something else, something that kept her feet on the floor. Evelyn pushed her cart to where Vanessa was standing. She stopped. They looked at each other. "How are you?" Evelyn said. Vanessa's throat moved. "Cooperating," she said. It was a word with a specific technical meaning now, and they both knew it, and the fact that Vanessa used it instead of fine told Evelyn something about where she was. Good, Evelyn said. A pause. Around them, the grocery store made its grocery store sounds. Carts, refrigeration hum, someone's child asking for something in a nearby aisle. I keep thinking about what I would say, Vanessa said, if I had a real chance to say it. Not the cafe. The cafe was... I was so scared and so ashamed that I don't think I actually said what I meant. What did you mean? Evelyn said. Vanessa looked at her. That I knew who you were. I knew exactly who you were, and I chose to take from you anyway. And the worst part, the part that I can't stop thinking about, is that knowing you, being your friend, made it easier. Because I knew you'd never look for it. I knew you trusted everyone in your life completely. And I used that. She paused. I used the best thing about you against you. Evelyn looked at her steadily. I know there's nothing I can do with that, Vanessa said. I know sorry doesn't... It doesn't, Evelyn agreed. But I heard it. She held Vanessa's gaze for one more moment. Take care of yourself, Vanessa. She pushed her cart forward and moved on down the aisle. She didn't look back. She paid for her groceries and drove home and unloaded them and put everything away in the kitchen where it belonged, and the ordinariness of the task, the mundane sequence of canned goods and refrigerator shelves, and the particular arrangement of her own kitchen, felt like something she had earned the right to again. The federal investigation did not resolve quickly. Hale had told her it wouldn't. The scope of the Celestine network, once the ledgers were recovered, from a commercial property in Georgetown, South Carolina, on a Thursday afternoon 3 days after Hale rerouted his warrant chain, turned out to be exactly as wide as the man on the phone had feared. 12 entities across 4 states. Financial activity spanning 6 years. Damian DeLuca's cooperation, secured before the ledger recovery, and therefore worth considerably more than it would have been after, formed the structural center of the prosecution's case. His cooperation did not protect him from consequences. It shaped them. There was a difference. The legitimate businesses, the restaurant group, the import company, the real estate holdings, were placed under court-appointed executive oversight while the investigation ran. The practical effect was that Damian DeLuca was removed from the operation of everything he had built, made a peripheral figure in his own empire, subject to reporting requirements and travel restrictions, and the ongoing humiliation of watching other people run his companies from a distance. Vanessa's cooperation agreement kept her out of federal custody. It did not keep her out of civil proceedings. 3 of the shell company clients whose money had flowed through her consultancy filed suits. The litigation would take time to resolve. Her South of Broad apartment was sold. She moved to a smaller place on James Island and contracted legitimate consulting work for a tourism nonprofit, and kept her head down in the way that people keep their heads down when they are waiting to see what remains after the water recedes. Damian and Vanessa separated in the early autumn. Not publicly, not with drama. The relationship simply ceased, the way things built on pressure and crisis and mutual utility tend to cease when the pressure lifts and the crisis resolves and the utility is gone. Marcus Webb, who had cooperated early and provided documentation nobody else had, reached a settlement that allowed him to retire. He sent Evelyn a card. It said, "You deserve better." I should have said so sooner. She kept it in the kitchen drawer where she kept things she didn't know what to do with but wasn't ready to throw away. She painted the fence on a Saturday in October. She'd bought the paint 3 weeks earlier. A warm terracotta, almost clay, the color she'd always known she wanted. And it had been sitting in the garage waiting for a day that had the right quality to it. The October Saturday had that quality. Cool enough to work comfortably, the light low and golden in the way of autumn afternoons, the air carrying the smell of something changing, the particular Charleston smell of old wood and salt water, and the slow exhale of a city moving toward its quieter season. She started at the far end of the fence and worked toward the house. Victoria came at noon with sandwiches and spent 2 hours working the middle section. Not because she'd been asked, but because she knew how to show up for things without being asked, which was the particular quality that had always made her indispensable. They worked mostly in silence, the scrape of brushes and the occasional observation about coverage, and the fence transformed under their work, the white giving way to the warm clay color section by section. By 4 in the afternoon, the fence was done. They stood back and looked at it. The terracotta against the deep red of the roses, the old wood of the trellis, the warm amber of the string lights beginning to come alive in the lowering afternoon. The yard was its own thing now, entirely, without any version of itself that had been designed around someone else's preferences. Good, Victoria said. Yeah, Evelyn said. They ate their sandwiches on the back porch steps. Victoria stayed until the light was fully gone, and the yard was lit only by the strings, warm and steady, and then she drove home. Evelyn sat alone on the back porch for a while. She thought about the night she'd come through the garden gate and seen what she'd seen. The white chairs and the flowers, and the two people standing under her trellis, and the 10 seconds she'd stood there counting. She thought about the quality of those 10 seconds, the way they had been both the longest and most clarifying of her life, the way they had contained inside them all the necessary information for everything that followed. She had been afraid, in the weeks after, that the yard would keep that shape, that it would remain the place where she had seen what she had seen, permanently overlaid with that night. But it didn't work that way. She could see now, sitting on the porch in the October dark with the terracotta fence warm in the string-light glow, that the yard was simply the yard again. The new color helped. The roses helped. The fact that she had spent a full Saturday on her knees in the dirt, rearranging the planting beds the way she'd always intended, helped most of all. Things became theirs again when you worked them back with your own hands. She had not looked for something to replace what she'd lost. The loss was still loss. 4 years, 12 years, the specific texture of a life she'd believed she was living. That was real, and she wasn't interested in pretending it had resolved into something clean. It hadn't. It had resolved into something livable, which was different and more honest. Nathan Ashford came into her life the way most things worth having came, sideways, without announcement. He was a history teacher at the high school, 6 blocks from her elementary school. She'd met him at a district professional development day in November, a full-day training on new literacy frameworks that she'd attended partly out of genuine interest and partly because Diane had suggested it, gently enough that it felt like a suggestion and firmly enough that it registered as a recommendation. He'd been sitting at the same table at lunch, which was how she'd learned he taught history, not from an introduction but from an argument he was having good-naturedly with the science teacher at the other end of the table about whether primary source documents counted as literature. She'd weighed in, mildly. He'd turned and looked at her with the expression of someone who had been waiting for a reasonable voice. They'd talked through lunch and through the afternoon session, and he'd asked for her number in the parking lot with the specific directness of a man who had decided not to be anything other than what he was. She'd given it to him. He was not like Damien in any way she could measure. He was quieter and less immediately commanding, without the gravitational field that Damien generated in rooms, without the particular glamour of a man who operated in shadows and made his own rules. He drove a sensible car and wore unpretentious clothes and brought her coffee from the place around the corner from the high school when he was in the neighborhood, because he'd learned how she took it, and he was the kind of person who retained that category of information without being asked. She trusted him slowly and deliberately, with her eyes open, giving each increment of trust only after it had been warranted, building the thing at a pace that felt right and not at a pace that anyone else was setting. He seemed to understand this without it being explained. He did not push. He did not perform patience. He simply was patient, which was different, and she recognized the difference because she'd learned it the hard way. In late November, he came to her house for dinner, and they ate in the kitchen, and afterwards she took him to the backyard to show him the lights, the roses, the terracotta fence in the dark. He stood in the yard and looked at it and said, "You did all of this yourself?" "Most of it," she said. "My cousin helped with the fence." He looked at the trellis, the climbing roses, the way the lights ran the fence line. "It's beautiful." "It took a while," she said. She was not talking only about the fence. He seemed to understand that too, in the way he was coming to understand her. Slowly, accurately, without filling the spaces she wasn't ready to fill. She stood in her backyard in the November dark with the string lights burning warm around her and felt the specific, hard-won quality of the life she was standing in. Not happiness exactly, not yet, though happiness was becoming available in ways it hadn't been for a while. Something more structural than happiness. The sense of standing on ground that was genuinely hers. Not because no one had tried to take it, not because she'd been protected from the attempt, but because she had fought to reclaim it piece by piece, document by document, choice by choice. The fence, the roses, the lights. The deed to the house her grandmother had left her. Evelyn's name alone on it, clear and clean. The federal letter in the kitchen drawer beside Marcus Webb's card. The 22 children who were reading above grade level. The terracotta that Damien had once called too loud. She had been right about the color. She'd known she was right. She'd simply been waiting until it was only her decision to make. That was the thing about the life she was standing in now. It was slower, quieter, less dramatic than the one she'd thought she was living, and the losses were real, and the cost of the last months was real, and none of it resolved into something clean or simple. But everything in it was hers. The garden, the work, the slowly building trust with a patient man who brought her coffee because he'd paid attention. The children, the literacy program, the morning she went to school when her world was falling apart, because 22 kids needed to hear the next chapter about a girl who trained horses. The choice she'd made on the phone with the man from the town car, when she'd said no to the clean exit that would have left her safe and intact and complicit in her own disappearance from the record. She had chosen to stay in the light, even when the light was uncomfortable, even when it meant her name in the federal documents, the meetings with Hale, the conversation with Diane, the grocery store aisle, and Vanessa's face. She had chosen all of it. Nathan said something behind her, some quiet observation about the roses, and she turned and looked at him, this man she was learning, and felt the future as a thing that was genuinely open. Not guaranteed, not safe, but open, which was all she'd ever actually wanted, and more than she'd realized. In 4 years of loving the wrong person, she had been quietly willing to give away. She didn't give it away again. She went inside and made tea, and he sat at her kitchen table and they talked until late, about ordinary things. The kind of conversation that builds its own structure slowly and doesn't announce itself as significant. And outside in the yard, her lights burned steady and warm against the terracotta fence, and the November roses, and the old wood of the trellis where the climbing vine had taken hold in its second season and not let go. The house settled around her in the dark, the 12 familiar creaks. She knew every one of them. She was home.